So first of all, I'd love to say just thank you so much to all you guys for showing up today. I know it's a big ask in our busy lives to kind of set aside an hour, to log on and watch a webinar. So I just like to start off by saying I'm super, super excited to share what I'm about to share with you guys today. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I know a few of you out there are quite curious about the high fat diet. You might have heard about it. It's definitely getting some momentum in the media and the mainstream media now. It's a very old science, but it's, how things go. It's just kind of starting to pick up momentum right now. So I'm really excited because this is a great opportunity for you guys if you're thinking about getting into the low carb, high fat diet, because I've had incredible experiences on the diet myself, and I know that because of the things that I've done and the protocols that I've followed on the high fat diet, it's led to a massive improvement in my quality of life on so many different levels. And that's one of the things I'm most excited to share with you guys. This is an opportunity, of course. Right now, you guys have the opportunity to learn more about the low carb, high fat diet, and if you decide to implement some of the protocols that we're going to touch on today, and obviously develop your own knowledge of the high fat lifestyle, it can lead to incredible changes in your body and in your mind. Some of the things that I've experienced, a lot of the things that they hold up inside the low carb, high fat paradigm is that it leads to an increase in energy, which we'll definitely talk about that in more detail a little bit later on. Improved concentration. These things are all, what I'm going to mention now is things that I've actually experienced, which is what's so exciting about this. When I first started learning about the high fat diet, like these were all concepts that I was like hearing about, so like the increase in energy, improved concentration, a decrease in cravings. This was a massive one for me. I used to have a lot of crazy little cravings, and this really kind of helped me out. And of course, there's weight loss. For some of us out there, maybe we're not too worried about losing weight or whatever the case is, but it's just one of these many benefits, and these ones that I'm just listing now are just the most obvious things, and the most obvious things that I noticed happening to my own body as I started turning from that kind of glucose burning body into a fat burning body. These are the things that started to happen to me. Another fantastic thing that happened to me is that I started building muscle a lot easier, and that's that really blew my mind. It's kind of hard to tell someone about how you're going to build muscle easier, because it's just kind of, to me, all these things that I've mentioned, the improved concentration and the decrease in cravings and the weight loss and the muscle building, they just kind of seemed so like, that classic when someone tells you about a new diet, and they tell you all these amazing benefits, and you're just like, when you do it, you're like, ugh, it's not quite true. So this is how I felt when I found the high fat diet and started learning about it. But then when I started experiencing it and experiencing these decreasing cravings and improved concentration and muscle building and the fat loss, it really blew me away, and it's so exciting, and it's really made a massive difference to my life. So this is a really exciting time for me, because I love to share what I've learned and what I've experienced. And if any of you guys out there, or any of your friends or whatever, are looking for some kind of change, this is definitely something to put them onto, and just to let them know, like, there's big things happening in this high fat world, and it's all science based. That's what's really exciting for me. And of course, science changes all the time, so I have a responsibility, we all have a responsibility to just kind of keep up with the science, make sure things are, still what they seem. But so far, everything I've read and everything I'm studying and all the people I'm talking to, we're all experiencing and learning and realizing the same things with this high-fat diet. So it's a really great opportunity, and I hope you guys enjoy what I'm about to share with you, and I hope you find some value in it. And my dream come true would be that you guys can make some changes in your lives if there's anything you want to change, and hopefully you can have some incredible experiences as well. So I'd like to just give you guys a quick background of, I know one or two of you guys out there, but there's some people that I don't know as well. So I'd just like to give you a little bit of a background of who I am and why I'm doing this, and what led me to learn about the high fat diet and implement it in my life, and then ultimately I really want to share it with people and help other people and just spread the word, because there's a lot of things that we could solve for ourselves, a lot of little aches and pains in our own bodies, and there's a lot of ways we can just get a lot healthier, in my experience and according to the science, with the high fat diet. So my name is Bryan, by the way. I think most of you know that. I have been practicing yoga for a long time, for about 10 years, and before that, in my early and late teens, in my early 20s, I was big time into the gym, working out, going to the gym every day, taking the protein shakes, but eating a standard Western diet, so a lot of bread, a lot of pasta, rice, all those things, a fair amount of salad, and getting one or two portions of vegetables a day. But when I started practicing yoga, for whatever reason, I kind of stumbled into vegetarianism as well. I ended up learning about, at the time I lived in the UK, so probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I suppose, I learned about the meat industry in the UK, and I never had an idea what was going on with the meat industry in the West, and I learned about that, and of course it really shocked me to the core, and I know everybody who sees it, even now it's still happening, people are getting exposed to it, and it's absolutely shocking. So that just disgusted me to the core, and so I went vegetarian. But I'm the kind of guy that, I do things properly, so even now when I'm on the high fat diet, I'm doing it properly. When I was a vegetarian, I was doing it properly. I went into vegetarianism, and I did, I was a really good vegetarian because I ate every single vegetable I could get my hands on in the supermarket. I ate every single fruit I could get my hands on. I went with all the nuts, all the seeds. Once I'd kind of maxed out how many vegetables and fruits I could physically eat during the day, then I got into juicing, and I bought a juicer, and I started making juices every day. If I was hungry, I would just pop a couple vegetables through the juicer and drink a pint of juice, or sometimes even a liter of juice. And then I got into smoothies, and I bought a blender, and I started making smoothies. They're slightly different drinks. And along with the smoothies came all the brown powders and the green powders and all the seeds and all the superfoods and all these crazy little things, the chia seeds and all these wonderful, highly nutritious foods that we as vegetarians and vegans, you tend to get into, and as humans, they're good food for everybody, really. But I was a really, really good vegetarian, and and I felt great for the most part. I lost a little bit of weight. I had a lot more, well, I didn't have a lot more energy, but I definitely felt a bit lighter, and I had some energy. Like looking back now, I realized that was all sugar-based energy, and I felt pretty good. But looking back, I realize now that my body started to deteriorate almost instantly when I stopped eating meat and went purely vegetarian. One of the most obvious things that I experienced when I went vegetarian was almost immediately I had digestive issues. I went from constipated the one day to diarrhea the next day, then constipated again, then diarrhea again, on and on in this cycle for probably 7 years. 7 years I had this constant, and it became a fixation. It became something that I woke up thinking about. I was like, oh, am I going to have a proper bowel movement today? And this went on for 7 years, and what I ended up doing is I ended up getting so deep in denial. I would say to myself, oh, I never had my chia seeds in my smoothie this morning, or oh, last night I had that pizza, or oh, I had the sandwich this morning. I always had an excuse for why my digestion wasn't working properly. And that went on for 7 or 8 years. Through all my travels, I traveled a lot the last few years, and looking back now, I realized that I was just in denial. I was so attached to my vegetarian yogi identity that I wouldn't come to terms with the fact that the vegetarian diet, something wasn't working for me. And what was most sad about it is that I was eating everything I could possibly get my hands on, like all of those things. And then shortly after that, after I started my digestive issues, I started getting joint pain. And I know a good friend of mine is listening right now, and he'll remember, like, I started, like, my knees. I couldn't even go for a short walk without having knee pain. And at this stage, one of the most severe times is when I was traveling, and we did a hike up a volcano, and we also did a trek through the jungle. And both times I ended up with such excruciating knee pain that during the trek I had to get a donkey to take me the rest of the way, because I literally couldn't walk. And when we were coming down the volcano, like, there was no other option. I had to walk. And every step going down that mountain was the worst pain I'd ever felt. So then I had this joint pain coming, and then it was in my wrists, and then eventually my elbows, and then my shoulders. And I mean, you can imagine what that does to you. Then you start at that time I was in my mid and late 20s, and I started thinking, like, my body is falling apart. Like, what is going on? So that ended up, making me take myself out of any sports. I couldn't do any running sports. I couldn't play frisbee. I couldn't play football. I couldn't like quickly run up the stairs or quickly run down the hill, because I was constantly worried about my knees hurting. And it got to a point where, I'd be working on the computer and my wrists would seize up, and they would seize up so badly. And I was just in a terrible, terrible situation, and I didn't know what was wrong. At that stage, I still wasn't blaming my diet. I actually thought that I had inherited arthritis from my father. I used to joke that I have my father's knees. So that was a really, really tough time of my life, and at that stage, I had no idea that it was, in my case, it was my vegetarian diet. Like, there was something that meat and animal products, I still don't even really know what it was, but there was something that was missing from my body that was literally making my body fall apart. So that was a really hard time in my life. It kind of really got me down, because I'm a carpenter as well. I worked during the day as a carpenter, and I remember, like, picking up power tools or picking up heavy things on the building site, and just literally having no strength. I had no grip strength. I couldn't, like, hold on to these heavy things without getting this, like, pain in my wrists, in both wrists, or it was just a really, really awful time in my life. And then something happened about 2 years ago. I found something called bulletproof coffee, which I was listening to a podcast of some kind. I can't remember what it was, and they were talking about bulletproof coffee and high fat, and I suddenly remembered that I'd heard about bulletproof coffee somewhere before, but I had no idea what it was. And so I Googled it straight away, bulletproof, and the bulletproof diet came up. So I ordered the book straight away, and I'll just actually let you know, a bulletproof diet is part of the high fat diet families, and that includes paleo and Atkins and the primal diet and the low carb high fat diet. They're all the same kind of thing, and bulletproof it's a slightly different take on the diet, but it's the same thing. It's a high fat diet, and it just happens to be the first thing I heard about in the high fat diet world. So I got hold of this book, The High Fat Diet, and just devoured it from cover to cover, and I was absolutely fascinated. The science and all the stories in it and all the examples made so much sense to me that I thought, I'm going to try it. I'd actually had started eating meat at that point, because I didn't know what else to do, and I'd started eating meat. But then the high fat diet book kind of introduced me into increasing the fat content of my diet, which it's so counterintuitive. It's so, I'm sure all of you out there are agreeing. Like, when someone says to you, like, you need to eat more fat, it's like, it's so counterintuitive, because the last 30 or 40 years, our parents and us, we've grown up with, low fat, don't eat fat, fat is bad for you, all these things. So it was really kind of weird to learn about it at first. And the first thing I tried, and the first thing I recommend to anybody I speak to, is you try a bulletproof coffee, or you at least try a high fat drink in the morning. And so I made the effort, and I did my research, and I bought some really good coffee, and I bought some really good quality butter. Now you can use coconut oil, and you can use ghee. I actually prefer to use ghee. But you need a really good quality saturated fat. That's very important. So I bought those ingredients, and I started drinking bulletproof coffee, and almost instantly, I just experienced like phenomenal things. I just on day one, it just gives you this amazing feeling of satiation. Like you feel so satisfied. You feel so kind of like uplifted and just so energetic. And within a couple of weeks of me starting just with bulletproof coffee, I changed my diet more or less at the same time, because what we'll get into later is that you can't really have carbs and fat at the same time. So I did do it properly, and I'm very committed and I'm very dedicated to the diet itself. And the more dedicated you are, the better the effects that you experience. So almost instantly, when I added more fat to my diet, did I see incredible changes. My energy levels went up. My cravings for junk food went down. My digestion started to I'm still working on my digestion. It's still a work in progress. I'm still testing, but almost straight away it started just getting better and more consistent. And another incredibly exciting thing is my joints just started to feel better almost instantly. And looking back, it makes so much sense, because I'm just I'm flooding my body with this really good quality fat and also collagen protein, and it's just made such an incredible difference to me. I have almost zero pain. I can, in my joints, I can go for long walks, I can go for hikes, I can play sport again, I can throw a frisbee around, I have the strength back in my hands. It's just made an incredible difference to my life, and I think a lot of you guys out there can benefit from this. I'm certainly not a unique case when it comes to the high fat diet. I know a lot of people that are getting, it's very, very similar results. I'm very lucky that my friends are kind of they really tolerate me and my passion about this high fat diet, and I love talking about it. So I've got a couple of close friends that have had incredible results as well. I had a good friend call me up a few months ago and just tell me that he was just feeling so bad. He was bloated all the time, and he was farting and burping and gassy and just not feeling good. So it was just a casual chat on the phone, and I just asked him what's he eating? And because I've read so much about the bulletproof diet and the potential problems for a lot of people on the vegetarian diet, is because, of course, when we go vegetarian, we tend to go towards the grains and the beans and the pulses. And these foods contain a lot of what they call anti-nutrients, which are basically, in the short story, is they're the plant's defenses against being eaten. So what an anti-nutrient does is it hampers the absorption of the nutrients that are in those plants or those beans or those grains, so that if you were an animal, you would eat it and you'd go, wow, I don't really feel good after eating this, and you'd never eat it again. It's for the plant to ensure its own survival so it can reproduce. So this buddy of mine was eating all these grains and pulses and all that, and I just said, this is what I'm learning. I told him all about it. I pretty much told him what I'm telling you guys right now, and he made some quick changes himself, and as far as I know, he's still drinking bulletproof coffee every day. And I called him back a couple of weeks later, and I said, how's it going with the bulletproof coffee? And he said, incredible. His bloating went down, his cramping went down, his energy levels went up, his cravings fell somewhat as well. And he's just one of the people that I've shared this with, and a couple of other people, both men and women have had very, very similar results. I think I'm seeing fantastic results for myself because I'm very committed and I'm very dedicated, and I know a lot about it. I'm quite like in terms of the science. I really know like what I'm doing with the high fat diet. So I'm seeing really good results, and I'm kind of tweaking it all the time as I learn more. I'm learning more about the high fat and how to actually really like do it like optimally, and my goal of course is to just feel the best I can, be the most energized I can, be the most focused I can, and be the healthiest I can, because then I can do the best work. And the work I want to do is help other people get healthy, so I hope everyone out there is okay and can still hear me. No one seems to be complaining. Hello, okay, yeah, all right, everyone's there, great. All right, so far so good. So the next thing is probably the most important thing that we should understand about the high fat diet, and that's the crucial difference between carbs, which break down into glucose in the body, and fat, which breaks down into ketones in the body. So glucose and ketones are the end products of those two food types, and that is the only two sources of energy that our bodies have. We do, in extreme circumstances, we can burn protein as well, but that's like emergency, and hopefully most of us will never get into that. That's when you're like sick and you can't eat, and then your body would start to eat itself. But for our studies right now, it's carbs versus fat. And now the biggest difference that we all, if we guys decide to move further into the high fat lifestyle, is you have to remember this next fact, and that is the story of what happens to your body when you eat carbs. Okay, so and most of us will be aware, carbs are, your obviously fruits have carbs, processed food, sweet potatoes, all those kind of root vegetables. And I'm not saying that your root vegetables are not healthy, but it's just important that you know that those ultimately break down into glucose, and glucose is a form of energy. So now what happens when we eat glucose? If you're either on like a high fat diet or you're on a carb diet. That's pretty much the only two options. If you're not eating carbs or fat, you're going to be having a really, really hard time. So what happens when we eat carbs and it turns into glucose? So, that glucose is sugar. That sugar goes into the blood, and you get what you call what's known as a blood sugar spike. So your energy level goes up. You have your fruit smoothie in the morning, or your processed whatever it is in the morning, or whatever you're eating, and your energy levels go up, and you feel fantastic and you feel good. But then as soon as your body senses that you have sugar in your blood, that's when your insulin gets released. And your insulin is a hormone that gets released from your pancreas. And the insulin gets released, it goes into your blood, it covers up all the glucose that it can find, and then that glucose can get into your body and your brain, the cells, and that's when the energy gets burnt. So you eat your sugar item, you feel fantastic, your energy levels rise, it's fantastic, the insulin comes out, the glucose goes into the cells, and it gets burnt up very, very quickly. Glucose is a very, very fast burning energy. That's why you can rise so quick, but the downside is that you crash. And this is something that I went through for years, like when I was in my vegetarian years, like drinking smoothies and eating a lot of fruit, constantly snacking on fruit. I was having these energy rise, feeling fantastic, crashing. And then eating more fruit or having another juice or having a snack or a chocolate, energy rise and crashing. Energy rise and crashing. And what's happening when you're constantly eating sugar snacks and your energy is rising and your energy is crashing, you're constantly triggering your insulin. And now, evolutionarily speaking, we're not supposed to be triggering our insulin that often, because the whole theory behind our bodies and how our bodies are pretty much the same as they were a million years ago. Fruit and tuber vegetables, the carbohydrate vegetables and fruits were very, very rare. So when we did eat them, we loved them, and we got an insulin spike and a crash, and it was fine because we only had fruit for a few weeks of the year. But the problem with our modern lifestyle is that we have any fruit all the time, and this is, and of course the processed food. Most of us that live in the West, we have access to any kind of snack you can imagine, and most of it, 99.9% of processed food will contain sugar and carbs, and this will lead you to this. So when you're constantly spiking and crashing and constantly releasing insulin, out of that hormone insulin to make up for all the glucose that's in your blood, all the sugar that's in your blood, you can eventually become insulin resistant or insulin sensitive. What that means is that it just doesn't work anymore. The insulin covers the sugar. The sugar tries to get into your cell to be used as energy, but because you have so much insulin constantly pumping around your body, your cells don't accept it anymore. So then you can't get energy from sugar anymore. So then what does that lead to? That leads to more cravings, and you eat more and more and more and more and more, and then you get, obese. That's when type 2 diabetes comes in because of this spike. And that's happening all the time. Whether you're eating junk food or you're eating organic fruit, it's the same effect on your body. It's the same effect. Sure, with the fruit, you're going to be getting some vitamins and minerals, of course. But the effect that the insulin spike and crash, the negative effect that has on you, it makes it not worth, spiking your insulin all the time for those few vitamins and minerals you're going to get. Dark green vegetables have way more vitamins and minerals than fruit does, and there's almost no sugar in those vegetables, so it's much safer. So that's the story of sugar, and that's the rise, the sugar crash. That's what you got to remember. It's always the sugar crash. That's what you have. Now with fat, when you eat fat, particularly saturated fat, which is the safer kind of fat, we might get to that later on. But when you eat fat, you take it in this example with the high fat drink in the morning, and the fat gets into your body, and because fat is so dense and such a thick energy source, what happens is that it's a very kind of steady rise to your energy peak, and then you just cruise. You cruise for 4 to 5 hours on one serving of fat, kind of thing. That's how we think of it in this diet. You cruise, and then around lunchtime you start to come down again, and that's when you start to think about eating food. Because something important to remember is, if you're thinking about food, obviously that means you're hungry. But if you're thinking about food like I used to think about it, I was constantly thinking about I'd love a snack, and it was always sweets. I was always thinking about sweets. If you're thinking about that, that means you're either going through the crash and spike cycle, or you're actually nutrient deficient in some aspect, which most of us are because of the quality of fruit and vegetables. They're not that great anymore, unfortunately. So, when you're thinking of food, it means you're hungry and you're planning on eating. But what I found, and what a lot of people are finding on the high-fat diet, when you take that energy in, it's so stable and it rises so steadily, and it gets to that plateau. And because the fat is such an energy-dense macronutrient, it switches off all those craving mechanisms in your body, because fat is such an energy-dense molecule. Your brain knows that it's well fed. So your brain and the rest of your cells can just carry on with what they're supposed to be doing. And you can carry on with what you're supposed to be doing. You can concentrate, you can focus. You're not constantly snacking, like you would be on a sugar-based diet. You're not constantly snacking, stopping every 2 hours for a banana or an apple or a smoothie or a juice. And you can just get on with it, and you can be a lot more, you'll be a lot more stable and a lot more balanced and a lot more focused on your work, and it can lead to much better productivity. And the crucial difference is that when you eat fat, it doesn't spike your blood sugar levels, so there's no insulin release, and there's none of this yo-yoing energy effect, and there's none of the risks that are involved with having constant insulin spikes in your body. So it's it's a much healthier state. It's a much cleaner burning state for your body to be in. Another point is that when we're in the sugar burning mode, when we're burning glucose, there's a lot of waste products that, like exhaust, if you want to term it like that, that comes from that sugar burning process, and those are the free radicals. We've all heard about these free radicals. I remember hearing about them years ago, but having no idea what they were. But all I knew was that they were free radicals, they were bad, and antioxidants, they were good. So you had to, you always had to have foods with antioxidants to take care of the free radicals. And now what the free radicals are is when the sugar molecule gets burnt inside the cell, there's an oxygen molecule that can't be used, so that it breaks off every single time. Every single glucose molecule loses an oxygen molecule, and then that becomes a free radical, and that goes around your body causing havoc. That causes inflammation on every single level in your body, because those free radicals get into your blood after the energy process, and they go through your blood, and obviously your blood goes everywhere in your body. So that's what's happening when you hear of these type 2 diabetics that have these insulin spikes and are eating a lot of sugar. They have so much free radicals in their body. That's why they sometimes have to get their limbs amputated, because the free radicals do so much damage on a cellular level. They are like radical. They're like very high energy, and they just move, and they want to link and bind to everything they can get their hands on. So that's in the extreme cases when you hear of diabetics losing limbs and having amputations, and diabetics going blind, and all these crazy things. And that's the free radicals which are coming as a result of the glucose burning model, the glucose burning body. So when you're on the fat, when you're using fat as energy, it's a very, very, very clean burning energy, and there's almost no waste. There's almost no free radicals coming off this energy burning process. And the very nature of the high fat diet is that you eat a lot of vegetables. We automatically exclude a lot of fruit out of our diets, and we eat a lot of vegetables. So what happens when you're eating a lot of fat and a lot of vegetables is that you're having the fat as the energy, and the tiny bit of free radicals that are coming off that fat that it's burning is easily being taken care of by the vegetables. Because most vegetables, if not all vegetables, are very, very high in antioxidants. So in every meal, in my case, I have a bulletproof coffee in the morning. Coffee is full of antioxidants. It's full of polyphenols. So I'm getting my fat in my coffee, and I'm getting all the polyphenols. So I'm instantly getting all those polyphenols, those antioxidants, going through my body as the fat's being used. And then for lunch and for dinner, I'm eating big piles of vegetables with big lumps of butter, and again I'm just flooding my body with those antioxidants, and taking care of all those free radicals. So that's the basics right there of the carb burning body versus the fat burning body. I know it can be a lot to take in, and it took a long time for me to get my head around it. And another spectacular side effect of being on the high fat diet is that your cravings almost completely disappear, because you're feeding your body and your brain so well. By the way, your brain is the biggest energy taxing organ in your body, right? Whether you're using glucose or you're using fat, your brain takes 20% of that energy off the top, because if your brain's not getting enough energy, the rest of your body fails. That's a no-brainer. So when you're feeding your body with fat, and your brain is getting to use the fat to do its processes, in your brain, the cravings are a function of the brain to tell you to eat. So when you're on the sugar thing and you're crashing, and your brain senses that the energy is low, that's when the cravings come in. And if you're getting cravings, you're on a sugar diet. And if you're on a sugar diet, what's your brain going to tell you to crave for? More sugar. So that's that big cycle. That's the cycle I was stuck in. That's the cycle a lot of people are stuck in. So I hope that's kind of clear. I mean, I'm going to want to leave some time for some questions at the end, but that's the basic understanding between the carbs, carb burning, and the fat burning. Does anybody have any questions right now before I move on a little bit? Next up, I want to just talk about a few myths that a lot of us have heard. Oh, we got a question. Let's see, what does this guy say? Okay, so I'm sure everybody can see that question there from Sean. So the bulletproof diet is it's a 2 week to start off. It's a 2 week program, you know. So I would say to Sean, what I did myself is I increased the amount of coffee I was drinking. So I use the same amount of coffee. So for me, it's 2 scoops into my French press, but I just put way more water. So it's quite a weak coffee, but I just put. I'm at the stage now where I put probably 2 big tablespoons of butter or ghee into my coffee, and I use MCT oils, which is another. It's a medium chain triglyceride oil, which is derived from coconuts. It's a very healthy oil, so I do that. But what you can do is you can, like you say there, you can as long as you stick to protein and fat to get you through the morning, you shouldn't have a problem. But what I recommend is maybe trying putting more fat into your coffee, drinking more coffee, or if you're not too happy with the caffeine, the caffeine is quite safe when you drink it with fat for some other reasons. But if you're not too happy with the coffee, go with the tea. Experiment with some tea. Like sometimes I make, like a rooibos tea, which is a caffeine-free tea, and I just add butter to that and oil to that and coconut oil because it gives it a nice flavor, and I drink that, But you do have to give it some time, because it can take for some people, up to 4 weeks to go from carb burning into fat burning. And I know for a lot of people, it's quite a big commitment and it's a big change. So a lot of people struggle to go like cold turkey on the carbs. So, if you're having high fat and high carbs, then you can kind of like, your body's in limbo. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it's eating the fat, but then it's like, it can be confused, and it can be like it can get some glucose cravings, So I definitely recommend adding more fat. Maybe stick to the boiled eggs, have the boiled eggs nearby, or some other kinds of protein, some other kind of really good quality protein. So try adding more butter and some MCT oils or even some coconut oil, because if you're getting hungry, basically it means not enough fat, or you're still in the carb burning mode, so you give that a bash. No other questions for now. Okay. Oh, there's a new message. Coconut oil as well. Okay, fantastic. All right, so some of the myths that I kind of want to go over that some of them are gonna hurt your feelings out there, guys, because some of them hurt my feelings, so the craziest one for me that I really had to get my head around is there is no such thing as good sugar. I heard it just the other day. I was in a hospital. No, it was when I was talking to my doctor, and she told me have the good sugar. Eat the fruit. It's the good sugar. It doesn't matter where your sugar comes from, whether it's from a candy bar or a chocolate bar or a milkshake or ice cream or fruit or sweet potato or coconut nectar or any of these sugars. All sugar has the same effect on your body, being the insulin crash and the spike. So, for example, where people were, in this wellness industry, people were changing from table sugar to agave syrup or coconut nectar or all these things because it's the healthier option. It is no healthier at all. In fact, table sugar is healthier than agave syrup because agave syrup is pure fructose, which can't be used by the brain at all. The brain can only use glucose. So if you have to choose between something like agave syrup And table sugar, you should take the table sugar because at least your brain can get energy. If you're using agave syrup, you're just kind of starving your brain even more and causing your liver to work overtime to process that fructose to get it out of your body. So that's a big myth, and that's something worth really remembering if you're going to get into the high fat diet. Like, if you have your bulletproof coffee in the morning, or your omelet or your other high fat breakfast in the morning, and then 2 hours later you have a banana, all you're doing there is taking, you've eaten that fat, and then as soon as you eat that banana, any fat that's unused becomes fat. It gets stored as fat because your body will always choose the sugar to burn first because it's a much easier sugar to burn. So it's something to really remember, and it's something that people struggle with when they first start, is that they have their bulletproof coffee, but then they have a fruit juice, or a smoothie, or a banana, or a couple dates, or anything with sugar, any fruit with sugar. It's a chemical reaction in your body. It's not that I'm saying fruit's unhealthy. I'm just saying it's a purely chemical reaction. And if your body has to choose between sugar or fat, it'll always store the fat because the fat is more valuable, because it's more energy dense. So it stores it as body fat on your body, and it burns the sugar because the sugar can get into your system a lot quicker. And then if you were properly living in the jungle, like ancient man, and you had that bit of fruit, it would give you some energy for the rest of the day, but you would not have any more fruit to eat after that. Then your body would go back to the fat burning mode, and it would use the fat that it's stored. So one of the biggest myths that we need to understand is that no sugar is good, unfortunately. And another massive myth to bust is that fat will make you fat, which is completely untrue. A lot of these myths come from the 50s and the 60s, when they first started studying fat and cholesterol and the effects of fat on the body and sugar on the body, and for various reasons that we won't get into now. But most of those, if not all of those studies, were flawed in the 50s and 60s, because it turns out that the guys that were releasing those studies, in particular a doctor called Ansel Keys, he was the first doctor to say that fat will make you fat, and fat is the reason why everyone is having heart attacks. He left out so much information, and when that information was re-released or dug up probably a decade ago, and it's completely nullified his findings. So that's another myth, that fat will make you fat. Now, there's a part of that that's true, and you will get fat if you're eating fat and carbs together for the same reasons that I've just explained. So for example, let's say if you're eating sandwiches every day, so the bread is the carbs, and the chicken or the ham or whatever you're eating in your sandwich with the butter, you're eating fat and carbs together. So the fat is being stored as fat, and the carbs are being turned into sugar and are being burnt by your body. But like I say, if you're eating fat in isolation of carbs, you will never get fat, because the fat just becomes the energy source for your body. So that's another myth. And then there's, like saturated fat is bad. That was the type of fat that was, like bastardized by these studies. And basically, very briefly, the difference between a saturated fat like butter and ghee and animal fat, and unsaturated fat like partly olive oil and the other vegetable oils that they make and sell us, is that when a fat is saturated, it's way more stable, because that saturation means that there is no space for the free radical, the oxygen, that crazy atom, that crazy molecule, to bind to the fat and to oxidize it, to make it go rancid. So that's why saturated fat is safer to cook with, and it's safer to eat, because it's way less susceptible to becoming rancid and oxidized, which is what causes the damage in your body. Now, unsaturated fats, which are the vegetable oils, your monounsaturated and your polyunsaturated, they have open links on their molecule, which when you eat that and the free radicals that are already in your body are going through your blood and they come into contact with unsaturated fat, they attack that fat, they oxidize the fat, so the fat becomes rancid in your body, and that's what leads to clogging your arteries. What leads to making you fat. That's what leads to this internal environment that can make you sick. Is the unsaturated fat. So a rule of thumb in the high fat diet is you always need to be aiming for saturated fat. A little bit of unsaturated fat is fine, raw. So the perfect example is olive oil. Never, ever, ever, ever cook with olive oil because it's partly unsaturated and that oxidizes, it goes rancid, and then you put it in your body and, hello disease and bad feelings basically. And another massive myth that's been going around for decades and decades is that cholesterol is bad. What they tell you when you're on the high-fat diet, oh my God, your cholesterol must be through the roof, I was told this only a couple of weeks ago in the UK. I went to see a doctor and I told her that, that I was on the high-fat diet, and she hit the roof and she said, this is so bad for you, it's so unhealthy, blah, blah, blah. And she's the one who told me, just eat the good sugars. So she sent me for all these blood tests and cholesterol and thyroid and all these hormone tests and really extensive tests. And they came back perfect. I've got the results here. I'm still in the process of deciphering them. My blood pressure was perfect. My hormones were perfect. My cholesterol was normal. The lipid count, the amount of fat in my blood was normal. And I've been on a very high fat diet for 2 years. And it was perfect. There is one kind of cholesterol which is bad, but it's only this cholesterol is the dense LDL cholesterol. It's only bad for you in the presence of carbs and unsaturated vegetable oil. Those are most of the myths, and I just wanted to kind of open up the table again. We've got about 10-12 minutes left. Does anybody have any more questions? I have a little bit more that I'd like to share with you, but if anybody's got some questions, you're welcome to ask them and we can handle that. No questions at all. Okay. I hope this is making sense to you guys. Okay. Wonderful. So, I just wanted to kind of maybe just go over a few more things to remember, maybe some tips. If any of you guys are thinking about getting into the high fat lifestyle, it is something that works better if you properly commit to it. I mean, like any diet, I suppose, but this is really more of a lifestyle, and this webinar has just really been, like it's called the intro to the high fat diet, because it is quite complex and a lot of information. And the high fat diet is actually part of, what I like to call, it's a paleo lifestyle basically. So it takes into account exercise and sun exposure and walking barefoot and the kind of light that you allow into your environment and biohacking, which we haven't unfortunately had too much time to get into. But just a few more things to mention, back to the sugar cravings. If you guys are finding that you're craving sweets, it's for one of two reasons. You're not a bad person, you're not weak, you're not going to be fat. It's none of these crazy things that, I used to think like that. I used to think, I'm just born to be fat. Cravings for sweets, like I said, comes from nutritional deficiency or an energy deficiency. So your brain thinks you're low on energy. It knows you're low on energy, so it thinks you're in a famine. So what it does is it switches on the sugar cravings. And of course, in this day and age, what kind of sugar do we get? We get sweets and candy and whatever. And the second reason you can actually get a sugar craving, which is when I found this out, it blew my mind. It can be because of your gut bacteria. You know, there's the Candida bacteria. All of us have Candida, and some of us just have it a lot worse. That's the bacteria in your intestines that lives on sugar. So when you're eating sugar, these bacteria are happy because they're getting their energy. But if you go on some kind of a diet or whatever, when you go onto the high-fat diet and you stop eating sugar, these Candida will actually starve. And what happens when they starve, when they don't get their sugar, they release chemicals into your intestines, which goes into your blood, which goes to your brain, which switches on your sugar cravings. So these bacteria in your stomach can actually affect the way you think and can control the food that you choose to eat, So that really, really blew my mind, when I learned that. And a couple of things that, if some of you out there are thinking about making some coffee or whatever, there are 3 sweeteners that you can use if you've got a sweet tooth. If you're into making sweet food, there's like some paleo desserts you can make, some high-fat desserts. So if you're looking, to use some sweeteners, there are some you can use. You can use xylitol, erythritol, and stevia, or stevia, depending how you pronounce it. Those are the 3 best, and actually those are the only 3 sweeteners you can use in your diet, and that's because those 3 sugars, xylitol, erythritol, and stevia, they don't cause the insulin spike. They don't behave in your body like glucose does. I mean, they're obviously not energy either. You can't, live on xylitol, but it'll sweeten your coffee, and it'll sweeten your desserts if you're into making sweet stuff like that, So personally, I don't use any sweeteners in my stuff, but I know a lot of people that do. They like to have sweet hot chocolate or whatever, and they use those 3. And xylitol is actually really, really good for you. If you pay attention, when next time you're in a organic supermarket or whatever, and you turn over and you look at the chewing gum, basically, like most of them will say sweetened with xylitol. And the reason they do that is because xylitol is a really good sugar. I mean, I don't like to say the word sugar because it's confusing, but it's a really good sugar for your teeth, because same thing, in your mouth you have bacteria that live on the sugar that you eat, and then they release acid in your mouth, and that is what gives you cavities. It goes through your enamel. But xylitol isn't a substance that these bacteria can use. So if you're chewing gum that has xylitol in it, obviously after a meal, you take your xylitol gum and you chew it up, and it's delicious and sweet. All that xylitol is going around your mouth, and actually it's not killing the bacteria, but it's starving it. So when there's no sugar, it washes all the sugar out of your mouth from your meal, and it starves the bacteria. So xylitol can actually be a great cavity prevention. I use xylitol gum, and I usually try and brush my teeth after I've eaten. But if I can't brush my teeth, then I pop some xylitol gum and just make sure I don't have any cavities. So that's fantastic. So I pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover tonight. I know it can be quite intense, quite a lot of information. It can be a slow process, especially like depending what kind of lifestyle you have. As it is, it can be quite a challenge to kind of go onto the high fat diet, because you have to literally like retrain how you see food. I remember when I went from the standard Western diet to a vegetarian diet, and for a time I was vegan. You have to look at food in a different way. You have to look at vegetables in a different way, And same when I went back onto the fat, I had to start. I still like, I'm 2 years on this diet, and I still like, when I go and make my coffee in the morning and I put like all this fat in, I'm like, oh my god, is this going to kill me? And like I say, science is always continuing and always growing. So at this stage, like, I've had phenomenal effects. I've lost fat. I've gained more muscle. My joints have been, my joints are almost perfect. My cravings are almost gone. It's absolutely fantastic. So Sean's asking, what's the best coffee to go for? The best coffee is single origin Central American coffee. So you don't even have to worry about organic, because organic, unfortunately, isn't quite that important in coffee manufacturing. But the best coffee to go for, besides Bulletproof, they sell their own brand of coffee. I use it sometimes, but the next best is is Guatemalan single origin wet process coffee. And in the UK, you can just go straight to a company called Monmouth in London. They do a Guatemalan single origin wet process, and it's very, very, it's expensive, but it's really, really good coffee. Raw honey is great to use, but honey is one of those things. I don't use honey. I love honey, but I don't use it anymore because it does the same thing. Raw honey obviously is healthier than table sugar because of all the pollen and the propolis and all the antiviral stuff in it. But if you're, in terms of high fat, if you're looking at it from that angle, it's going to cause the same problem with the insulin spikes and crashes. That you can have honey, and on the bulletproof diet, they actually recommend honey at night to help you sleep. But remember, if you're using raw honey to sweeten your coffee or your tea, you're boiling, not boiling it, but you're heating it up as soon as you put the honey into your coffee or your hot drink. So the best way to use honey, raw honey is medicine. It really is. So the best way to use raw honey is to take a teaspoon of it before you go to sleep at night. There's another reason. Like, you can eat fruit on the high fat diet, but only at night. And we'll need to get into that at another time. But Valentina's asking agave syrup. If you're into syrups as opposed to table sugar, agave is the absolute worst choice, because agave is pure fructose. So like I mentioned before, it breaks down, the liver it bypasses the brain. It doesn't go to the brain because the brain can't use fructose. So the body, fructose is in fruit as well, by the way. So the body takes the agave straight to your liver, where your liver has to work overtime to process the fructose, and you pass it out, through your bowels or whatever. So if, Valentina, if you're looking for something to sweeten, I'd look at primarily xylitol, stevia, and erythritol. They do have a very, unfortunately, significant taste. But depending what you're using your agave for, like raw honey, is your best option, because it's at least a lot healthier than agave, and it's got glucose in it. And glucose is fuel for your brain. But on a high-fat diet, there's unfortunately almost no room to be using honey regularly. Like I say, I do love honey, and if you're wanting to use your raw honey, you treat it like a medicine. You take it at night just before you go to sleep. It helps you sleep because that glucose rush actually helps your brain while you sleep, and you'll be asleep. So, there'll be no cravings at all. But unfortunately, honey, you have to treat it like any other sugar. And agave, in my opinion, what's going to start happening now, I know like most of us live in the UK or somewhere in Europe, and Canada as well, is that you're going to start seeing now, because of all the momentum that the high-fat diet is getting, all these things in the health food shop. Like, now that I know what I know about food, when I walk around the health food shop, it's a joke. It's just another candy store. You see these organic like candy bars with dates and whatever. Like, okay, it's not as processed as a Snickers or a Mars bar, but it's the same thing. It's just a sugar bomb going into your body. And these are being sold as like health foods. Okay, they're a little bit healthier, but you can still get diabetic eating health food bars, with agave in them. Maybe it takes a bit longer, I don't know, but it's like I say, broken down, what sugar does to your body. All the sugars do exactly the same thing, So that's pretty much it. So we're pretty much at the end of it, guys. I thank you so much for showing up, everybody. Thanks, Emma. Emma says, I suppose you guys can all read it. Thank you so much for showing up. I know it's a lot to take in, and Emma, if it's there is ways to kind of integrate high fat into a vegan and vegetarian diet. It's a little bit more difficult, but it is certainly possible. Thank you guys so much for showing up.